The massive alien vessel descended through Earth's atmosphere like a burning mountain, its hull scarred by countless battles across the galaxy. Ambassador Zex Thul watched the primitive blue world grow larger through the observation deck, his forearms crossed in what humans would recognize as skepticism. The Galactic Council had sent him here for one purpose: to witness the impossible. According to reports filtering through the interstellar communication networks, something unprecedented had occurred on this backwater planet. The humans, barely capable of faster-than-light travel for 50 Earth years, had somehow managed to calm Vorthak the Destroyer. The very name sent shivers through the spines of species across 12 sectors. Vorthak was a creature of legend, a dragon whose mere presence had turned entire star systems into graveyards. Zex Thul's tentacled companion, Science Officer Malura, approached with data tablets clutched in her translucent appendages. Ambassador, the energy readings from the planet's surface are peculiar. There's no trace of weapons discharge, no signs of battle, no evidence of the typical destruction pattern we associate with Vorthak encounters. The ambassador's primary eyes narrowed, while his secondary ones remained focused on the approaching planet. Perhaps the humans deployed some unknown technology. Their species has shown remarkable adaptability, despite their brief presence on the galactic stage. Through the communication array, reports continued streaming in from various council species. The Arctarian Collective had lost 3 colony worlds to Vorthak in the past decade. The silicon-based Crystalline Empire had abandoned an entire sector after a single sighting of the dragon. Even the warrior race of Kelvons, bred for combat across generations, spoke of Vorthak in whispered tones around their warfires. The dragon was no ordinary predator, standing nearly 200 meters tall, with wings that could blot out a small moon. Vorthak possessed hides stronger than neutronium plating, and breath capable of melting through starship hulls in seconds. More terrifying than its physical capabilities was its intelligence. Vorthak didn't simply destroy. It calculated, planned, and executed strategies that had outmaneuvered entire fleets. Captain Jorik of the Hegemony Defense Corps had transmitted his final message just days before their departure for Earth. His voice, normally steady as a mountain, had trembled as he described watching Vorthak tear through their formation like tissue paper. "The creature doesn't just kill," he had said. "It learns. Every maneuver we attempted, every weapon we deployed, it adapted faster than our tactical computers could process." Now this apex predator of the galaxy had somehow been neutralized by humans, not destroyed, according to the reports. Neutralized. The distinction was crucial and deeply unsettling to the galactic community. Their ship, the diplomatic vessel Harmony's Edge, settled into Earth's orbit alongside vessels from dozens of other species. The normally territorial races had put aside their differences, united by curiosity and disbelief. Feline-like Nexari prowled the corridors near insectoid Zephyrians without the usual territorial displays. Gaseous ethereals maintained stable forms in observation lounges, filled with solid matter beings. Even the notoriously reclusive Void Dwellers had sent representatives. As their shuttle descended toward the human settlement called New Geneva, Zex Thul reviewed what little information they possessed. 3 months ago, Vorthak had appeared in Earth's solar system. Standard procedure called for immediate evacuation alerts. But the humans had inexplicably maintained radio silence. Long-range sensors had detected the dragon making planetfall on Earth's largest continent, in an area the humans designated as their North American territory. Then, nothing. No distress signals. No evidence of planetary destruction. No refugee ships fleeing the system. After 2 weeks of silence, a brave Centaurian scout ship had ventured close enough for detailed scans. What they discovered defied everything the galaxy understood about Vorthak's behavior patterns. The dragon was still there, settled in what appeared to be a permanent roosting position near a human settlement. But instead of the expected wasteland of ash and molten stone, the area showed signs of increased agricultural activity. The humans weren't fleeing, they were thriving. The shuttle touched down at the designated landing zone, a large field surrounded by the curious architecture humans favored. Zex Thul had studied their building methods during the journey. Noting how they combined aesthetics with functionality, in ways that differed markedly from most galactic species. Where others built for pure efficiency or pure beauty, humans seemed to seek a balance between the two. A delegation of humans waited to greet them, led by a tall female with graying hair, who introduced herself as Secretary General Martinez of the United Earth Council. Her confidence struck Zexthul immediately. Most species who had encountered Vorthak, even briefly, carried themselves with the careful movements of traumatized survivors. This human showed no such signs. Ambassador Zexthul, she said, extending her hand in the human greeting gesture they had studied. Welcome to Earth. I understand you're here to witness our unusual situation. The ambassador accepted the handshake, noting the firm grip and steady eye contact. Indeed, Secretary General, the Galactic Council finds itself in need of understanding regarding your encounter with the entity known as Vorthak the Destroyer. Martinez smiled, an expression that had taken Zexthul considerable study to interpret properly. I think you'll find our encounter quite different from what you've experienced elsewhere in the galaxy. But before we explain, perhaps you'd prefer to see for yourself? They traveled in human ground vehicles, which Zexthul found surprisingly comfortable despite their seemingly primitive design. The delegation included representatives from 7 different species, each bringing their own recording equipment and scientific instruments. The journey took them through rolling hills covered in the green vegetation humans called grass, past structures they used for food production, and alongside waterways that sparkled in their sun's light. Your planet shows no signs of dragon damage, observed Science Officer Malura, her voice carrying the confusion they all felt. According to our database, Vorthak's presence should have resulted in significant geological scarring. Oh, there was some initial disturbance, Martinez replied casually. A few forest fires, some property damage when Vorthak first landed. But that was resolved fairly quickly. Quote, the casual tone with which she discussed property damage from a galactic-level threat left the alien delegation exchanging glances. Zexthul had personally seen the aftermath of a Vorthak encounter on Kepler 442b. The planet's crust had been cracked like an eggshell, its atmosphere stripped away, leaving nothing but a barren rock drifting through space. As they crested a hill, the delegation fell silent. There, in a valley below them, lay Vorthak the Destroyer. Even at rest, the dragon's size defied comprehension. Its scales, each larger than their shuttle, caught the sunlight and scattered it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. The massive head, capable of swallowing their entire diplomatic vessel, rested on forelimbs that could reshape mountains. But what stunned the delegation into silence wasn't the dragon's awesome presence. It was what surrounded Vorthak. Humans moved freely around the creature. Some tended to gardens planted near its massive bulk. Others had set up what appeared to be research stations, with equipment pointed at the dragon from various angles. Children played in the shadow of its wings, their laughter carrying across the valley on the afternoon breeze. And sitting directly between the dragon's enormous front claws, so small as to be almost invisible against the creature's bulk, was a human child. The little girl couldn't have been more than 8 Earth years old, with dark hair tied in the style humans called pigtails. She held something in her hands that she was showing to the dragon's massive head, which had lowered to bring one enormous eye level with her position. As the delegation watched, transfixed, the child reached up and gently touched the dragon's snout. Vorthak the Destroyer, terror of the galaxy, bane of civilizations, closed its eyes and seemed to lean into the touch. Impossible, whispered Captain Thornek of the Hegemony, his translator barely managing to convey his disbelief. That creature has destroyed entire fleets. Its hide can't be penetrated by antimatter weapons. How is that child? How is she still alive? Secretary General Martinez completed his question with another smile. That's what everyone wants to know, isn't it? The great mystery that's brought half the galaxy to our little planet. Zexthul activated his recording equipment, knowing that the Galactic Council would demand detailed documentation of everything he witnessed. Secretary General, we require a complete explanation of how this situation developed. The implications for galactic security are enormous. Of course, Martinez agreed. But I think you'll understand better if you meet the person responsible for this breakthrough. She gestured toward the valley below. That's Emma Chen down there, 8 years old, second-grade student at New Geneva Elementary, and apparently the first being in galactic history to successfully communicate with Vorthak. The delegation's instruments registered spikes in various energy readings as Vorthak shifted slightly, adjusting its position to better accommodate the small human. The motion, which would have sent most species fleeing in terror, barely caused the nearby humans to look up from their activities. Communication. Malura's voice carried scientific excitement despite her obvious fear. You've established actual communication with the entity? Emma has, Martinez corrected. And before you ask how a human child succeeded where entire galactic civilizations failed, I should mention that we're still trying to figure that out ourselves. What we do know is that 3 months ago, when Vorthak first arrived and began what we assumed was an attack pattern, Emma walked out of her family's shelter and approached the dragon. The story that followed challenged everything the delegation thought they understood about both human behavior and dragon psychology. According to Martinez, the adults had been evacuating according to emergency protocols, when 8-year-old Emma Chen had simply walked away from the evacuation convoy and approached the massive predator that had just incinerated several square kilometers of forest. Her parents were terrified, of course, Martinez continued as they descended into the valley. Everyone expected, well, what any rational being would expect when a child approaches a galactic-level threat. But instead of attacking, Vorthak stopped. Just stopped. And when Emma held up her hand, the dragon lowered its head to investigate. As they drew closer, Zex Thul could see the child more clearly. She appeared completely comfortable in the dragon's presence, chatting animatedly while holding up what looked like a drawing. The dragon's massive eye tracked the movement of the paper, and its head tilted in what almost resembled curiosity. The first contact lasted nearly 4 hours, Martinez explained. Emma sat there talking to Vorthak, while every government on Earth held its breath. We had military units positioned to evacuate her at the first sign of aggression, but the dragon never showed any hostile behavior toward her. Toward our aircraft and vehicles? Yes. It made very clear that they weren't welcome. But Emma seemed to be under some form of protection. The implications sent ripples of unease through the delegation. Every species had legends of dragon-touched individuals, beings who could communicate with the great predators. But those were myths, stories told to children, not documented reality. As their vehicle approached the edge of the designated safety zone, human officials in protective gear approached to brief them on interaction protocols. The procedures struck Zex Thul as remarkably casual for managing contact with a galactic-level threat. No sudden movements, the lead official explained. No energy weapons or scanning equipment beyond basic recording devices. Vorthak tolerates our presence. As long as we don't do anything, it interprets as threatening. And absolutely no interference with Emma during her interaction periods. The dragon's head lifted as their group approached, fixing them with a stare that had reduced hardened warriors to trembling wrecks. But instead of the killing rage that had destroyed countless ships, Zex Thul saw something different in those ancient eyes. Intelligence, yes. Power beyond measure, certainly. But also something that almost resembled patience. Emma looked up from her drawing and waved cheerfully at the approaching delegation. Hi. Are you here to meet Vorthak? He's really nice once you get to know him. Look, I drew him a picture of my cat. She held up a piece of paper covered in the colorful scrawls that human children use to represent their world. To the dragon, whose species had conquered star systems and accumulated knowledge across eons, she was showing a crayon drawing of a small domestic feline, and Vorthak the Destroyer leaned down to examine the artwork with what appeared to be genuine interest. Ambassador Zex Thul found himself in an unprecedented situation. In his 3 centuries of diplomatic service across the galaxy, he had negotiated peace treaties between species who communicated through bioelectric pulses, mediated territorial disputes involving hive minds, spanning multiple worlds, and once spent 2 years learning to properly interpret the musical language of the harmonic collective, but standing 50 meters from a creature that had single-handedly reshaped galactic politics through pure terror. Watching an 8-year-old human child show it crayon drawings challenged every framework he possessed for understanding reality. The dragon's massive head moved with careful precision as it examined Emma's artwork. Each nostril was larger than a starfighter, and when Vorthak breathed, the displaced air created wind patterns that rustled the clothing of everyone in the valley. Yet the creature maintained perfect control, never moving quickly enough to startle the small human or disturb her drawings. Emma pointed at different parts of her picture with the enthusiasm typical of human children, explaining their creations. "This is Mr. Whiskers," she said, indicating an orange blob with triangular ears. "He's my cat, and he likes to sleep in sunbeams." "Do you have sunbeams where you come from?" The question was directed at Vorthak, and the dragon's response stunned the assembled delegation. A low rumble emerged from the creature's throat, not the terrifying roar that had preceded the destruction of civilizations, but something almost conversational in tone. The sound carried harmonics that their translation devices couldn't process, suggesting a complexity of communication beyond current galactic understanding. Emma nodded seriously, as if the dragon's response made perfect sense. "3 suns sounds really bright, Mr. Whiskers would love that, but he'd need lots of shade trees too." She began working on another drawing, this one featuring what appeared to be 3 circular shapes above a landscape filled with triangular forms that might represent vegetation. Dr. Sarah Chen, Emma's mother, approached the delegation with the careful movements of someone who had spent 3 months adapting to life in the shadow of galactic legend. Her credentials as a xenobiologist had prepared her for studying alien life forms, but nothing in her training had covered this situation. "The communication appears to be primarily emotional rather than linguistic," she explained quietly, mindful not to interrupt Emma's interaction. "Emma doesn't claim to understand Vorthak's vocalizations in the way we might understand words, but she responds to them as if they convey meaning." Science Officer Malura activated her recording equipment, though she kept it carefully concealed to avoid attracting the dragon's attention. "Has your daughter always displayed unusual empathic abilities? Enhanced sensitivity to non-human communication patterns?" Dr. Chen shook her head. "Emma's always been good with animals, but nothing that would suggest extraordinary capability. She has a dog, a cat, and she volunteers at the local animal shelter. She's patient and gentle, but so are thousands of other children. What makes this situation so remarkable is that it appears to be entirely natural to her." The delegation spread out around the valley's perimeter, maintaining the distances specified by human safety protocols while documenting everything they observed. Each species brought their own instruments and analytical frameworks, hoping to understand how a human child had achieved what military forces and diplomatic corps across the galaxy had deemed impossible. Captain Thornek of the Hegemony focused his sensors on Vorthak's energy emissions, searching for any explanation for the creature's docile behavior. "The dragon's bioelectric field shows none of the aggressive patterns we've documented in previous encounters. If anything, the readings suggest a state analogous to contentment." Ambassador Crix of the Nexari Coalition, whose feline ancestors had given his species enhanced predator recognition instincts, studied the interaction through different filters. "The positioning is significant," he observed through his translator. "Vorthak has placed itself in a protective posture around the human child. This is not tolerance or mere restraint. The creature is actively shielding her from potential threats." To demonstrate this point, a human research drone approached the interaction area from an oblique angle. Immediately, Vorthak's head snapped toward the device, and a low warning growl filled the valley. The drone pilot quickly adjusted course to a wider path, and the dragon's attention returned to Emma's artwork. The message was clear. Approach the child. Face the consequences. Emma seemed oblivious to these protective displays, focused entirely on her conversation with the galactic terror. She had moved on to showing Vorthak a series of photographs, apparently family pictures from her tablet device. The dragon examined each image with the same careful attention it had given her drawings. "This is my grandmother," Emma explained, holding up a photo of an elderly human woman. "She makes the best cookies in the world, and she tells really good stories about when she was little." "Do you have a grandmother?" The dragon's response this time included what sounded almost like musical tones, complex harmonies that rose and fell in patterns too sophisticated for their translation systems to parse. Emma listened with the serious attention children reserve for important adult conversations. "She sounds wonderful," Emma said when the dragon finished. "I bet she told you good stories too. Did she teach you how to fly?" Dr. Martinez approached the diplomatic group with additional information that had been compiled by human researchers over the past 3 months. "We've documented over 50 hours of interaction between Emma and Vorthok," she reported. "The pattern is consistent. Emma treats the dragon as she would any large, intelligent animal, showing it respect, but no fear. Vorthok responds with protective behavior and what appears to be genuine engagement." The documentation revealed details that challenged fundamental assumptions about dragon behavior. Vorthok ate only when Emma wasn't present, apparently unwilling to display its predatory nature around the child. The dragon had redirected several natural lightning strikes away from the valley during thunderstorms. Most remarkably, it had begun helping with human agricultural efforts, using controlled applications of its flame breath to clear diseased sections of forest and prepare ground for new planting. "The energy output calculations are staggering," reported engineer Vax of the Crystalline Empire, whose silicon-based thought processes excelled at mathematical analysis. "The precision required for Vorthok to apply destructive capabilities for constructive purposes suggests cognitive abilities far beyond our previous estimates. This creature isn't simply intelligent, it's operating at genius-level problem-solving capacity." As afternoon stretched toward evening, they observed Emma's daily routine with the dragon. She showed Vorthok her schoolwork, shared snacks that were comically small compared to the dragon's size, and eventually curled up against one of its massive forelimbs to read a storybook aloud. The dragon's breathing slowed to match her relaxed rhythm, creating a gentle rise and fall that seemed to help the child focus on her reading. The story Emma chose was a human fairy tale about a brave princess and a misunderstood dragon who became friends. As she read, her voice carrying clearly in the still air, the assembled delegation began to understand something profound about the situation they were witnessing. "She doesn't see Vorthok as a monster," Dr. Chen explained when several delegates questioned Emma's apparent fearlessness. "To her, Vorthok is simply another intelligent being who needed understanding rather than fear." She approached the dragon the same way she approaches any new animal, with curiosity, patience, and kindness. Ambassador Zex's Thule reviewed the implications as he watched the child and dragon interact. Every galactic civilization had approached Vorthok as a threat to be destroyed or defended against. Military tacticians had developed strategies for containing the creature. Diplomatic corps had attempted negotiations based on power dynamics and territorial agreements. Scientific teams had studied the dragon as a phenomenon to be explained and classified. None had tried simply befriending it. The human approach violated every established protocol for managing galactic-level threats. Where other species had sent their strongest warriors and most sophisticated technology, humans had allowed a child to walk up to the dragon and start a conversation. The contrast highlighted something unique about human psychology that the galactic community had overlooked during their brief contact period. As Emma finished her story, she looked up at Vorthok's massive eye and gently patted the scales near where she sat. "I need to go have dinner with my family now," she said matter-of-factly. "But I'll be back tomorrow morning, okay? Maybe you can tell me more about your homeworld." The dragon's response was a soft rumble that somehow conveyed acknowledgement and perhaps affection. Emma gathered her drawings and books, kissed the tip of Vorthok's snout with the casual affection children show toward beloved pets, and skipped toward where her parents waited at the edge of the interaction zone. The kiss stunned the delegation into complete silence. Every being present understood the significance of what they had just witnessed. Vorthok the Destroyer, the creature whose very name was spoken in whispers across 12 sectors, had allowed a human child to show it affection in the most vulnerable way possible, and the dragon had gently nuzzled her in return. As Emma reunited with her family and headed home for the evening, Vorthok settled into a resting position that still kept the entire valley within its protective range. The message was clear. The dragon wasn't simply tolerating human presence. It was actively guarding this place and these people. "This changes everything," Ambassador Crick said quietly, his feline features reflecting the shock they all felt. If humans can establish this kind of relationship with galactic apex predators, it alters the entire balance of power in our region of space. The implications rippled through each delegate's understanding of interstellar politics. Dragons had been the ultimate wild card in galactic affairs, unpredictable forces that could appear without warning and reshape entire sectors. If humans could communicate with them, potentially ally with them, it would make Earth's species far more significant than their technological limitations had suggested. But more than political ramifications, what they had witnessed challenged fundamental assumptions about intelligence, communication, and the nature of relationships between species. Emma Chen hadn't employed advanced technology or sophisticated negotiation tactics. She had simply treated Vorthak with the same kindness she would show any being capable of thought and feeling. The galaxy had spent millennia developing complex frameworks for managing threats and establishing hierarchies based on military capability and technological advancement. A human child had achieved more meaningful contact with a galactic legend through the simple expedient of being genuinely friendly. As night fell over the valley and the delegation prepared for their evening briefings, Vorthak remained vigilant in the darkness, its massive form a protective presence watching over the human settlement below. Tomorrow would bring more questions, more analysis, and more attempts to understand the impossible. But for tonight, in a quiet valley on a small blue planet, a dragon slept peacefully knowing that in the morning, a little girl with crayon drawings and endless questions would return to continue their conversation about sunbeams and grandmothers and the wonderful complexity of life across the stars. 3 days after the delegation's arrival, Ambassador Zex Thul found himself participating in the most unusual diplomatic conference of his career. The meeting took place in the valley itself, with Vorthak serving as both subject and silent participant in discussions that would reshape galactic understanding of interspecies relations. Emma had insisted that any important talks about her friend should happen where Vorthak could hear them, displaying the kind of inclusive thinking that had made their unlikely friendship possible in the first place. The 8-year-old sat cross-legged near the dragon's massive head, coloring in a new sketchbook while the assembled representatives of a dozen civilizations debated the implications of her relationship with galactic legend. The precedent is unprecedented, declared Chancellor Vextar of the Outer Rim Territories, his crystalline voice carrying overtones of confusion. Our databases contain no record of successful long-term peaceful contact between any civilization and a dragon entity. The ramifications for territorial defense planning are enormous. Dr. Chen had been invited to present her research findings to the group, offering the first scientific analysis of dragon-human interaction ever conducted. Her preliminary results challenged everything the galaxy thought it knew about dragon psychology and behavior patterns. Vorthak appears to operate from a cognitive framework significantly more complex than our models predicted, she explained, gesturing toward data displays that showed brain activity patterns, emotional mapping, and behavioral analysis. The creature doesn't simply respond to threat and food stimuli. It demonstrates curiosity, protective instincts, aesthetic appreciation, and what can only be described as genuine affection for certain individuals. Emma looked up from her coloring at the mention of affection and beamed at Vorthak. Of course he has feelings, she said with the matter-of-fact tone children use for obvious truths. He gets sad when it rains because the water makes his scales itch. He likes music, especially when I sing the songs my grandmother taught me. And he worries about the little animals in the forest when the weather gets cold. The dragon's rumbled response seemed to confirm her observations, though the delegation's translation equipment still couldn't parse the complex harmonics of dragon communication. Emma had become their only reliable interpreter, a responsibility she approached with the same casual competence she brought to all aspects of her unusual friendship. Science Officer Malura had spent the past 3 days conducting detailed scans of both Emma and Vorthak during their interactions, searching for any explanation for their unprecedented communication ability. Her findings had surprised everyone, including herself. There's no evidence of enhanced psionic capability in the human child, she reported to the assembly. No unusual brain activity patterns. No enhanced empathic responses. No indication of any special biological adaptations. Emma appears to be, by all measurable standards, a completely ordinary human child. Then, how do you explain the communication breakthrough? pressed Captain Thornick, whose military background made him focus on tactical implications. If there's no special ability involved, what enables this unprecedented contact? Dr. Martinez, who had observed every interaction between Emma and Vorthak over the past 3 months, offered the explanation that had gradually emerged from their research. Emma doesn't communicate with Vorthak differently than she does with any other intelligent being. She talks to the dragon the same way she talks to her teachers, her parents, or her friends. The breakthrough isn't in Emma's ability, it's in her approach. The concept sparked intense discussion among the delegation. Every civilization had developed complex protocols for first contact situations, elaborate frameworks designed to establish communication while minimizing risks and misunderstandings. Humans had accidentally achieved better results by having a child simply walk up and start a conversation. Emma demonstrated this approach throughout the day, maintaining a running commentary with Vorthak about everything from cloud formations to her thoughts on the various alien visitors. She showed no awareness that she was engaged in anything extraordinary, treating conversations with a galactic legend as naturally as she might chat with a neighbor. "Look at how pretty the mountains are today," she said to Vorthak, pointing toward the distant peaks. "The snow makes them look like they're wearing white hats. Do you have snow where you come from?" The dragon's harmonious response seemed to convey complex information about multiple climate zones across different worlds. Though Emma translated it simply, "He says his home has lots of different kinds of weather, but his favorite is when it's warm enough for the flower trees to bloom." Ambassador Crix had been analyzing the interaction patterns from his species' predator psychology perspective, and his observations revealed crucial insights about dragon social behavior. Vorthak's responses suggest highly developed social intelligence, he reported. The creature modifies its communication style, posture, and even breathing patterns to match Emma's emotional state. This indicates capacity for complex social bonding that we've never documented in dragon encounters. The implications rippled through military and political planning sessions taking place simultaneously across the galaxy. If dragons possessed sophisticated social intelligence, previous strategies based on treating them as simple apex predators would need complete revision. More significantly, if humans could establish genuine relationships with dragons, it would fundamentally alter the balance of power among galactic civilizations. On the third evening, Emma invited the delegation to observe what had become her favorite part of each day: story time with Vorthak. She had discovered that the dragon enjoyed human literature, particularly stories that featured themes of friendship, adventure, and understanding between different types of beings. "Tonight I'm going to read about the Little Prince," Emma announced, settling against Vorthak's foreleg with her well-worn book. "It's about someone who travels between different worlds and learns important things about friendship and love." As Emma read, her clear voice carrying across the valley in the evening stillness, something remarkable happened. Vorthak began to respond to the story, not just with the usual attentive rumbles, but with complex harmonic patterns that seemed to echo the emotional content of the narrative. When Emma read about loneliness, the dragon's tones carried melancholy undertones. During passages about discovery and wonder, the harmonics soared with what could only be described as joy. "The dragon is emotionally engaged with abstract narrative concepts," whispered Dr. Chen in amazement. "Vorthak isn't just listening, it's experiencing the story." The revelation added another layer to their understanding of dragon intelligence. These creatures weren't simply powerful predators with advanced cognitive abilities. They were sophisticated beings capable of aesthetic appreciation, emotional depth, and imaginative engagement with fictional narratives. They had, quite literally, been completely misunderstood by galactic civilization for millennia. When Emma finished the story, she looked up at Vorthak's massive eye and asked, "Would you like to tell me a story from your world?" What followed was the first dragon narrative ever shared with another species. Vorthak's harmonious language painted images of vast crystalline cities that grew like living things across desert worlds, of dragon communities that created art from controlled flame and constructed music from the harmonics of wind through stone. The story told of young dragons learning to fly among gas giant storms, of ancient libraries carved into asteroid cores, and of the loneliness that came from being misunderstood by younger civilizations across the galaxy. Emma listened with the rapt attention children bring to compelling stories. occasionally asking questions that helped clarify details for the watching delegation. Through her simple queries, they learned that dragon civilization was far older and more complex than any galactic database had suggested. Dragons weren't solitary apex predators. They were artists, scholars, and philosophers whose advanced culture had developed over millions of years. "Why did your people stop talking to the other space people?" Emma asked when Vorthak finished his story. The dragon's response was long and complex, filled with harmonics that suggested sadness and frustration. Emma translated with the straightforward honesty that characterized all her communications. "He says the younger peoples always tried to fight first and talk later. It made his people sad and angry, so they stopped trying to be friends and just protected themselves when the others came too close." The explanation hit the delegation like a shock wave. Dragon aggression wasn't predatory behavior. It was defensive action taken by an advanced civilization tired of being attacked by species who feared them without attempting communication. The galaxy's understanding of dragon-related conflicts would require complete revision. Ambassador Zex Thul realized he was witnessing a pivotal moment in galactic history. The accidental breakthrough achieved by a human child was opening possibilities for relationships that had been considered impossible for millions of years. If dragons could be approached as potential allies rather than inevitable threats, it would change everything about how civilizations expanded and interacted across space. Over the following days, Emma facilitated additional exchanges between Vorthak and the delegation. The dragon shared information about space navigation techniques unknown to galactic civilization, artistic concepts that incorporated manipulation of matter at the quantum level, and philosophical frameworks for understanding consciousness that challenged current academic thinking across dozens of species. In return, the delegation members shared stories and information about their own civilizations. Vorthak listened with genuine interest to accounts of Nexari hunting songs, Crystalline Empire architectural innovations, and hegemony military traditions. The dragon's questions revealed sophisticated understanding of the political and social challenges facing younger galactic civilizations. He wants to know if the space people would like to learn dragon stories too, Emma announced, after a particularly long exchange. He says his people have been waiting a long time for friends who wanted to listen instead of fight. The offer represented an unprecedented opportunity for cultural and scientific exchange. Dragon civilization clearly possessed knowledge and capabilities far beyond current galactic standards. Access to their accumulated wisdom could advance every field, from technology to philosophy to art. But more than practical benefits, the potential for genuine friendship with dragons offered something that had been missing from galactic politics: the possibility of relationships based on mutual respect and shared curiosity, rather than territorial competition and resource conflicts. As the delegation prepared for their return to the Galactic Council, Emma made a request that would resonate across civilizations for generations to come. She asked if Vorthak could visit other worlds to meet new friends, the same way the space people had come to meet him. "I think everyone would like dragons better if they got to know them like I know Vorthak," she said with the simple wisdom that had made their friendship possible. Maybe they just need someone to show them how. The final image that Ambassador Zex Thul would carry back to the Galactic Council was of Emma Chen, age 8, kissing Vorthak goodbye on the tip of his massive snout, while promising to write letters that could be delivered by the diplomatic ships traveling between Earth and the Council chambers. As their vessels lifted away from Earth's surface, each delegation member understood that they were returning to a galaxy forever changed by the simple power of a child's kindness and a dragon's loneliness, finally finding the friendship both had been seeking across the vast freed loneliness of space. The age of dragon wars was ending. The age of dragon friendship had begun. Started by a little girl who had seen past fear to the possibility of understanding, and an ancient being who had waited millions of years for someone to offer the simple gift of genuine affection. In the months that followed, the first dragon cultural exchange programs would begin, leading to advances in art, science, and philosophy that would benefit every species in the galaxy. But none of these achievements would be as significant as the lesson learned in a quiet valley on Earth: that the greatest diplomatic breakthroughs often come not from sophisticated negotiation or superior firepower, but from the courage to approach the unknown with an open heart and genuine curiosity about the thoughts and feelings of others. no matter how different or frightening they might seem.